Welcome to Coding with Kyle, and the next feature that we're going to work on is Sam's. I do want to say that Ruby and Wiley both have the dodging feature, like Addison, and so there's already a video for that. So the next feature is this idea of 4 main action controls. So in Sam's project, he's having an action button used in the game for special ability, 4 different ones of them. They're going to be in the player sprite, and basically there's a left arrow, right arrow, up arrow, and down arrow that will do different things. One will attack an enemy, one will daze attack an enemy without it attacking back and do a cooldown. So this will be interesting to look at. This one will give you a shield to decrease damage, and this one will heal you. So let's go ahead and take a look at Scratch and go ahead and make this. So we have our player sprite, and the first thing that we're going to do is actually just make those keys. All right, so whenever the keys are pressed, we're going to have 4 different keys. So let's drag them all out here. And the keys that we're going to have is let's do the left arrow on the left side. That makes sense, right? And the up arrow on top, the down arrow on the bottom, and the right arrow on the right side. So let's go ahead and take a look back. The left arrow will do an attack that will damage the enemy. So the first thing we want to do is symbolize that this attack is happening, right? So whenever you do a punch, your character makes a punching motion. Let's go to costumes and let's find a punching costume. So for the cat, and this is something that maybe you guys can draw and stuff, right? So let's do this cat flying. That kind of looks like punching in the air. So we're going to call this punch. And costume 1, this is going to be our main costume, okay? So we're going to go ahead and go to the code, and we'll do the left arrow. The first thing we want is the visual appearance of punching. So switch costume to the punch, and then we're going to need to apply damage to the enemy so that the attack will damage the enemy. We need to create a variable for that. That is going to be enemy HP. So the enemy is going to have a health bar. And notice I don't even need the enemy on here to create the health bar. All right, so I'm going to create this enemy health bar, and the punch is going to change the enemy health by whatever number. It's going to go down. So however much damage you want it to do, let's just go ahead and say 3. But that's something that Sam will have to figure out. Is how much does his enemy's health going to have? How many attacks is it going to take? How many punches does it take to take down an enemy? So the next thing we want to do is we want to make sure that we're able to attack the enemy. So let's go ahead and create an enemy. What kind of enemy do we want? I kind of want to make it Frank, but Frank looks so nice. We can't beat up Frank. Oh, the ghost is so nice too. All right, but we're going to do the ghost. That is such a cute ghost. Okay, so we have our enemy here, and we're just going to go ahead and, yeah, I guess we can keep our enemy titled Ghost. Why not? So when the left arrow is clicked, we're going to switch to the costume punch. So no matter where our character is, we left arrow and they punch. But what we want to do next, before we change the enemy health, is we want to check if the player is touching the enemy, right? We want to check to make sure that we're actually going to just, we don't want to punch them across the map. That would be OP. So we're going to sense if the player is touching the ghost. So we're coding in the player. If it's touching the ghost, then change the enemy health by 3. We want to make sure to include a stop this script at the bottom. And the other thing we want to do is we want to go into the backdrop real quick, add an event for when the green flag is pressed. We want to make sure we set the enemy HP to whatever number. So remember, backdrops, whenever the green flag is pressed, that signals the start of our game. This is where we want to set all of our variables and our starting sprites and our starting backdrops. Okay, so we click the green flag. The enemy HP is now set to 20, and I'm going to go ahead and punch. And if you notice, first off, let's look that our character is in the punching motion. So whenever we start the game, So when the green flag is pressed, that signals that we are starting. We want our character to be on their main costume. Okay, so they're going to be on their main costume. And after we're done applying the damage to the enemy, we want to switch the costume back. So we're going to punch, and then we're going to switch it back to main. But maybe we're going to go ahead and wait a little bit of time. Okay, we probably want to wait. So that way, like what right now, if I were to hit the arrow, I'm clicking the left arrow, but it doesn't look like the costume is doing anything. And that's because it's switching in the costume so fast that we can't even register it with our eyes. So we want to at least have the animation be like maybe 0.25 seconds. So boom, quick punch, comes back. And if you want your cooldown to be longer, you can increase the time or you can even decrease it. Maybe you want it even shorter. Quick punch and come back. And because it's not touching the ghost, the enemy health is not going down. But if we are touching the ghost, we punch and boom, 17 damage. And so this 0.2 seconds, having something like this is really important because what's preventing someone from just spamming the button on your game? I'm clicking the button more times than it's doing damage because of this wait 0.2 seconds. And this is how you control how OP a character is going to be. You want to give your enemies a fighting chance back. So by having the cooldowns longer, that means the player is going to have to move around. So maybe the player does the punch, and now it's 0.5 seconds so they can punch again. So now if I spam this, the health is going down way slower. So this gives the enemy time to hit the player back. So then this will encourage the player to come in, do a quick punch, and then come back out. And those are some of the game mechanics you might want to think about. So let's go and look at the other features. So now we have an uppercut that blocks the enemy from attacking back. So let's say that this ghost, let's give some movement to our ghost, okay? So this ghost is going to have an event that whenever the green flag is pressed, that means the game is starting. We probably want to wait maybe 2 seconds before it shows up. So maybe we say that the ghost starts off hidden, and then after 2 seconds, it's going to go to a starting position. And the starting position can be there. And then we want it to be visible. And this is to give the player a little bit of time in the game to get themselves oriented, right? If you click start, the green flag, a lot of people have to move the mouse over here and click, and then they don't have their keys set up on the like on the buttons that they need to press. So you want to give them some time to get in position to play your game. So you click start, and then it's going to delay a second before it starts. So we click the green flag, it's hidden, and after 2 seconds it pops up. And what we want the ghost to do is to keep maybe going towards the player. So motion, they're going to go towards the player. But we don't want it to go to, that'll just pop them right to the position, right? We want to them to glide 1 second towards the player. And maybe they glide for 3 seconds towards the player, and then we have them pause. So this is going to mean that the ghost guides for 3 seconds, following us, then it stops, then it'll glide for 3 seconds again. And this is creating a path for our enemy that our player can now use to go around. So 3 seconds happens, the ghost moves towards us. As we move up here, it'll go towards us. Hello? Oh, there we go. Wait 1 second. And now it's coming towards me over there. And I move down. And then it's gliding to where I was. So now I can move this way. So it keeps going to where I was. And let's say that while it's doing this, while the ghost is doing this, it's going to try to hit us back, right? So we need a variable that is player HP. And in the backdrop, remember we want to set player HP at the beginning. So we're going to set player HP, and maybe we also have 20 damage. And so the ghost is going to glide for, let's make it glide for 1 second, and then it's going to do a check if it's touching us. So if the ghost is touching the player, And then it's going to do an attack that's going to make the player health go down by maybe 2. And then we can have it motion, we can have it glide again. Or this is fine. So it glides for a second, and then maybe it waits 0.25 seconds before moving again. So it's going to glide for a second, try to do an attack, wait 0.25 seconds, and then glide again. So let's see what this looks like. So we start, it glides for a second towards the player, and it did an attack on us. And so now we need to move the player over here. I move the player over here, and now we have to keep moving around to dodge it. And as soon as it clips me, then it, so now boom, it does damage. So we need to keep moving around, trying to dodge this. And now this is already a hard game. I'm just moving it around with my mouse, but we can set the controls, right, to where we move with WASD. It moves at different speeds. So dodging it's hard. But now I need to try to do damage to it, to its health. And that's where I need to be, try to go in, okay, when is my opportunity to attack? But this will give our enemy a chance to attack us. And now we can focus on this right arrow, Daze attack. So we're going to go ahead and switch the costume. What other costume? Let's find another costume. So that's our punch. Let's get rid of costume 2. And let's find another one. This flying one, that looks like an intense Daze attack, right? So this will be our Daze. And so we're going to switch the costume to Daze. And again, we're going to say if touching the ghost. So I can just copy this code, right? So boom, duplicate. If we're touching the ghost, then we want to do 3 damage, wait 0.5 seconds before it switches the costume back. So it's the exact same thing, except now we have a Daze part. So what we want to do is broadcast a message. So change it by 3, wait 0.5 seconds. So we're going to go ahead, hit it by 3, and Daze it. So broadcast message, Daze. And this is going to be something that the ghost can receive. So now whenever the ghost receives a message of Daze, its motion will be set. It will need to stop its motion and be stunned. Okay, so let's do a couple things. We want to find a costume. And let's take Ghost A and we'll duplicate it and we'll put that it's dazed. We want a visual effect to show that the ghost is dazed, and maybe I'm just going to draw like, a little like circle over top. That's going to show that it's dazed. Something real simple there. So we want to switch the costume to dazed. Ooh, this is a good glide thing. Ooh, that's so cool that that's there. All right, so what is that costume? Ooh, this is what we want it to be when it's gliding, right? So this is glide, and this is still. Okay, so whenever it's gliding for a second, right before it does that, we want to switch the costume to glide. That'll look really cool. And whenever the green flag is pressed, right after it shows, right before it shows, we want to switch the costume to still. And then when it's waiting 0.25 seconds, it's not moving. So before that time, we'll also switch the costume back to still. So that's going to look really cool. All right, so Daze, we switch the costume there. And then the motion, what we're going to do, so we're actually going to have to take this out, okay? And we're going to have to add in another signal. So we're going to have to broadcast a message when I receive Daze. We need to stop this motion from running. So we're going to need a variable that says enemy move. And this is going to be like a Boolean variable. So what we're going to do is we need to make sure we set the variable in the backdrop. So set enemy move to 1. 1 is going to mean true, and 0 is going to mean false, okay? So what that means is for the ghost, when the green flag is correct, we're going to forever do this, but we're going to wrap all of this in an if statement. And we're going to say if, so this is all of the gliding movement, this is all of its motion, but we only want to do that when it's allowed to move. So if the variable enemy move is equal to 1, that means yes. 1 means yes, right? So if the enemy move is equal to 1, that means it is allowed to move, and it should continue doing all of this other stuff. And if not, it's going to be, we'll say that it'll be dazed. So let me do this, and let's actually use an if-then statement. I'm sorry. Boom. All right, grab that over there. And I want to use the if-else statement. I'm sorry, if-else. And we still want this to be there, and all of this happens if there. So if the enemy's allowed to move, so if the enemy's movement is equal to 1, they're allowed to move, they do all their gliding stuff. Else, it's 0, that means they're not allowed to move. And if they're not allowed to move, that's when they're dazed. So we're going to switch the costume to dazed, and then we're going to wait 1 second. So it's going to wait, they're going to be dazed for a second. So now whenever they receive the dazed signal, all that they need to do is change the variable of dazed. So change, set the enemy move to 0. And now enemy move no longer equal to 1, they're going to be dazed. After they're done being dazed, after waiting a second, we need to make sure we set enemy move back to 1, so that way they're no longer dazed. And that's how we're going to switch these back and forth. All right, so stop this script. So now, if I click the green flag, the enemy's move is 1, they're allowed to move, and they're gliding at me. Okay, but if I'm over top of them, and I click on the right arrow, they're dazed for, well, maybe they're not dazed for a second. There we go. Maybe they were dazed for a second, and that is a really fast second. So let's say, so they receive the animal, receive daze. Let's wait for 3 seconds. All right, so green flag is pressed. We start. Enemy move is 1. They glide towards me. They keep trying to glide towards me. Boom, I daze them. There we go. 3 seconds is a lot longer of a time for us to get away. If you notice, boom, they're over top of me, and I click them and daze them, but they also hit me for 2 as well. And that's the risk of this game, is the enemy keeps coming at you, and you're trying to get in hits before it can hit you. Okay, so that's the daze attack, and now the daze attack needs a cooldown. So right now we have this 0.5 seconds, and we can just increase that time to maybe 8 seconds. So you won't be able to do it again until it's on cooldown. Actually, that's not going to work. So the left arrow clicks. So we're going to need to check. We can probably create variables for the cooldowns. So we need to make a variable that says daze. I would put CD for cooldown. So we're going to put this. We again set it in there, and daze cooldown 0. It's going to be true or false. So the cooldown, it's not on cooldown. You can use it, so it's going to be 0. And we now have a bunch of variables popping up there. We want to hide the daze CD, and we want to hide the enemy move. We just want player HP and enemy HP to be seen. So we go to the player. Now if it's touching the ghost, so the right arrow, we switch the costume to daze. Before we do that, we want to check something. We want to wrap all of this in an if statement and put the stop the script there. And this is going to say if the daze is not on cooldown. So if daze is equal to 0, the days cooldown, so if the days cooldown is equal to 0, that means it's not on cooldown, you're able to use it, let's do the daze thing. So we say, okay, we switch the costume to daze. Now if we're touching, we daze them. If they're touching, then we want to put the daze on cooldown. So we're going to set daze to 1, and this is going to put it on cooldown. And what we're going to need is some time to take it off of cooldown. So what we can do is inside the ghost, whenever it receives daze, it sets the enemy move to 0, and then it's dazed here. But we can also add in a wait. We can say wait, so their enemy is dazed, the enemy move is 0, and it's going to wait for 3 seconds before moving. Well, let's wait for 7 seconds, and after those 7 seconds, we're going to set the daze cooldown back to 0. So the daze cooldown is going to be 7 seconds before you can use it again. We also want to communicate, though, with the player if the daze cooldown, if it's not on cooldown yet. So let me take this out, and I keep using an if-then statement, and what we really need is an if-then-else, okay? So if, then, else. So if the daze is not on cooldown, do all of the motion stuff, we want to close our puzzle piece at the bottom, else, that means they are dazed, we want to let the player know, like, hey, it's on cooldown. So we're going to say daze on cooldown. Okay, so we hit the green flag. This starts our game over. Those now go away. The ghost is coming at us. We're moving around. It gets to us. We daze it. It's dazed. It comes at us. I try to use it again. Oh no, it's on cooldown. It's still coming. It's still on cooldown. Oh, there we go. Now it got off cooldown, and I was able to get it there. So it's continually saying say daze on cooldown. We probably don't want it to keep saying that. We want to say it just for a second. Say on cooldown, and we're just going to pop that up for 1 second so it's not too distracting, and that'll fix that problem. Okay, so the right shield that decreases the damage to you, and that's with the upper arrow key. So the upper arrow key is going to create a shield. So what this will do is we can switch a costume. So we have these costumes. Let's just duplicate this main costume, and I'm going to go ahead and call this one shield, and we're going to, I like the color blue for a shield, and I'm just going to draw, that's a little too big, this shield icon. Very great shields. Yeah, we're just going to leave it like that. That's our shield. Okay. So we have this shield. So when the up arrow is pressed, we want to switch the costume to the shield. Oh wow, I spelled shield wrong. Let's fix that so that way Mrs. Haygood, that's the way to make Mrs. Haygood happy. All right, so shield spelled correctly. So we switch to shield, and now we say that we need to decrease the damage. Okay, so we switch the costume to shield when it's pressed, and what we need to do is we need something that it's like while it's pressed. Okay, so we need to switch. We'll eventually need to switch the costume back to the main costume. And maybe shield only lasts for a certain amount of time. So let's wait 2 seconds. Let's say the shield lasts for 2 seconds, and before switching back to main. And then during this time, what it's going to do is it needs to broadcast that it's shielding. So new message, shield. No, actually we can do a different thing. I actually don't like that one as much. We're going to create a variable, and it's going to be another Boolean that says is shield. And this is a question. Are we shielding? So in our backdrop, again, we need to set the shield to 0. That means we're not shielding. And then we're going to go ahead and hide the shield variable. So that way it's not on our UI. And then here, what we're going to do is when we press the up arrow, the shield is on. So we're going to set the shield is shield to 1. That means we're shielding. And then after 2 seconds, we're going to set the shield back to 0. That means we're not shielding. So if I hit the up arrow, we switch to this costume of the shield, and then after 2 seconds it goes away. And you can see the is shield before it hides keeps moving. So now the ghost is going to need to check whatever it's hitting us. So right now, where does the ghost hit us at? Right here. If it's touching the player, then change the HP by -2. So if it's touching the player, inside of that, it needs to check another thing now. It needs to check if we're shielding. If the player is shielding, so let's say, we need to do if then, or if then else, right? So if then else. So if we're touching the player, then we want to apply damage to them. But if they're shielding, we want to do less damage to them. So what we're going to say is if the shield is equal to 0, right? That means they're not shielding. So if shield is equal to 0, this means that the player is shielding, and that means we want to change their health not by -2, but maybe we change the player HP by -1. So now we're doing less damage to them. And maybe the ghost normally does 5 damage, and now our shield is really strong. So let's hit the green flag. The ghost comes at us. Whoops, we're dodging it around, and I'm afraid I'm going to get hit, so I shield, and it did not block the damage. I think I mistimed it. So the ghost glides towards us, and then it attacks. So let's increase the shield time. Let's increase the shield to 4 seconds, and during that 4 seconds, we should not get hit at all. So the shield in the backdrop is set to 0, that means we're not shielding. So if it's equal to 0, then change it just by -1 instead, else we're going to hit the player for 5, and then here we change the shield to 1. All right, so let's try again. The ghost comes at us. I'm going to immediately shield, and it did not work. Why not? So we're shielding, it's set to 1. Ghost is coming at us, we shield, it hits us for 5 and 5 and 5. That time it just hit us for 1. So is the shield equal to 1? Equal to 0. Oh, it's equal to 0, then they get hit by 1. Huh. So we flipped these by accident. So if the shield is equal to 1, that's when the player is shielding and we only take 1 damage. So let's try this again. Boom, the enemy comes at us, we put our shield up, and now we're only getting hit for 1 damage while our shield is active. But as soon as it goes down, we get hit for 5. All right, so that's working. Our last thing with the down arrow is this will increase your health if lowered. All right, so what we're going to do is we'll press it, and we'll say for each press, we'll increase the health by 1. So let's do a healing costume. So this will be a duplicate of our main, but now we'll put healing. We'll say this is like a healthy item, and we'll just put a big heart around. Well, actually, what we can do, let's do green. Green is like a health icon color. Nice dark green. Cool, let's do that later. Okay, and we'll put boop, boop, the plus for like gaining health. Okay, yeah, let's do that. Okay, so that's when they're healing. And I don't know why that did not switch to healing. Healing. Okay, so now we click on the down arrow. Same thing. We want to switch the costume to healing. And what we're going to do is we're going to change our own health. So we're going to change the player HP by 1. So we're going to increase it by 1, and then we're going to wait 0.5. Let's do 0.25 seconds. Well, no, let's do 0.5. So we're going to go ahead and try to click and spam this to heal. But at only 0.5 seconds, so we can't spam it too much, and we'll go up by 1. So ideally, it looks like what this attack is doing, and what we can do, and maybe we want to apply a cooldown to this, just like we did over here for the right arrow, but it looks like when we program our guy to move, we can move around, then we also need to switch the costume back to main, right? So switch costume after 0.5 back to main. Okay, so we move around. We try to avoid getting hit by the ghost. Then with our left arrow, we can punch the ghost back. But what we want to try to do is if we get hit with a bunch of damage, we want to use the right arrow to daze the ghost. Then we can back off and use the down arrow to heal some health back for when the ghost comes and attacks us again. And then we can always use our up arrow to shield more. And we should be able to shield and heal at the same time. And we can always change those numbers to be better. Let's say, all right, so now we're shielding, we're taking 1. Boom, I just plus 1 as well while the shield is active. Now I'm taking a lot. Let me shield again, and I'm going to go ahead and daze the enemy. Now I'm going to heal while the enemy's dazed. I'm going to go back up to the shield. Oh, it's on cooldown. Oh, that's right. Haha, so you can't spam it. Now, boom, I dazed it. So that's on cooldown. Cool, so now you can see like this is kind of like a fight here. This is going on. We're trying to balance using our different abilities, and this is a pretty cool game that's going to happen. So, but these are the different, how to create 4 different types of attack features. And that's it for today.